Despite having the number one overall picks from the 2014 and 2015 drafts on their team, the Timberwolves had very little success with Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. The one year that they did make the playoffs was back when they had Jimmy Butler, but since he was traded, they haven't come close to making the playoffs again. And there is good reason for that, because overall, I just feel like this organization has made a number of rushed, questionable moves that might not have been as big as the Jimmy Butler moves that won't get as talked about as much as that one, but nonetheless, I just don't think that they pushed the needle in the right direction for this team going forward. I mean, there were a lot of people who said that the Jimmy Butler trade shouldn't have gone down in the first place and that Minnesota gave up too much to get him. But when Jimmy was healthy with them, Minnesota was actually fighting for the 3 seed that first year that he was there. It wasn't until he got hurt that they ended up dropping down to 8th. But after that, after Jimmy was traded, they kind of made some moves that I didn't really like and moves that I think they might end up regretting. The first one was when they traded Robert Covington away in exchange for Malik Beasley and Juancho Hernan-Gomez. I just feel like Robert Covington is a guy that literally every single team in the league wants. He's just like a perfect role player, a guy that isn't going to demand the ball, isn't going to worry about his shots, worry about his touches. On offense, he's just going to space the floor and hit open shots. And then defensively, he's super versatile. He can guard almost any position on the floor. I mean, he showed that in Houston last year. And he's a guy that you can play in so many different lineups, which is so important in today's NBA, right? Hernan-Gomez, he's a solid shooter, solid defender, but I just think that Covington is better at the things that Hernan-Gomez does well. So I'd rather just have him. And then Malik Beasley, although he's a great shooter and a great scorer, better than Covington, he doesn't really help the Timberwolves in areas that they need to be better in, right? They're already a great offensive team, a great scoring team, just by the looks of their roster. They didn't necessarily need another guy that can score the ball but isn't a great defender. And that's kind of what Malik Beasley is, so I don't really know how I feel about that fit. And then last year in the draft, they traded Dario Saric and the 11th pick for Jarrett Culver. And, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of Jarrett Culver even going into that draft. And I just feel like what he showed people in his rookie season, it wasn't enough to change people's minds, really. He didn't really show us too much, and I mean, I know it's early, I know that he's only played one season, but like I said, I just wasn't a huge fan of him coming in regardless, and I don't think he's even really going to be a starting level player in the league. I think that he can be a nice rotation player at some point, but that's probably it. But I mean, if they didn't trade for him, they could have held on to Dario Saric and kept that 11th pick and got someone like Cam Johnson, PJ Washington, or even Tyler Hero with that pick, while also holding on to Dario Saric, like I said. So let's say that they just held back on those two trades. They could have now still had Covington, Dario Saric, and maybe Tyler Hero instead of what they have now with Malik Beasley, Hernan-Gomez, and Jarrett Culver. Personally, I think Covington, Saric, and Hero sounds better. I just think that the problem with a lot of rebuilding organizations is that when they don't get immediate results, they feel like they have to shake things up and make moves to, kind of make the franchise guys that they have feel like they're going in the right direction. But I think Minnesota would have just benefited from hanging on to those guys personally. But even with all of that being said, there are still things to like about this current team. They will be one of the better shooting teams in the league, and they should have a top 15 offense at least, I think. Maybe even top 10 if all goes well. I think that their starting lineup will probably be D'Angelo Russell at the 1, Anthony Edwards at the 2. I think they're going to start Josh Okogie at the 3 just so that they can get some more defense in that lineup, and so that Malik Beasley can come off the bench and be like the primary scorer off the bench. So I think for that reason, Okogie will start at the 3, then Hernan-Gomez will start at the 4, and obviously Towns at the 5. And then off the bench, you're going to have Rubio, Beasley, Jarrett Culver. Jake Layman can be a nice little stretch 4, and then Ed Davis, who they picked up. I thought that was a little underrated signing. So that's going to be their rotation, in my opinion. The most important thing this year is going to be the development of Anthony Edwards. If he can be a guy that can make an immediate impact, then I think that's going to be really good for the Timberwolves. I think that he can fit in really well already with Towns and Russell, just because he's not necessarily going to be the number one scoring option, of course, when he comes in, but he can still play pretty well off of them, I think, just because he's a guy who's going to be able to really attack closeouts well, just because he's so athletic, he's so explosive. So when Towns or Russell are drawing multiple defenders, if they kick out to Anthony Edwards, he's going to have a lot of like lanes to the basket to attack, which I think is going to be really good. I think he's also going to get a lot of open threes, which could help build his confidence at the next level as he works on that three-point shot. And then in transition, he's going to be really great too. And there's going to be times where he's going to be like the primary scoring option in the game. Maybe if Towns or Russell are on the bench, Edwards can kind of be the focus of the offense, and he'll be able to get buckets there too. So I think Edwards is going to be really good. But yeah, it's just defensively where he has to improve a lot. He's about like 6'4", 6'5", and he looks pretty built. So I think there's potential for him to guard like 1 through 3 if he really like maxes out his potential on the defensive end. But I mean, his rookie season, I think there's a chance that he could be really good offensively. Maybe give them like 16 to 18 points a game on pretty good efficiency. I think the most important thing, though, is that he is at least like respectable from 3, maybe around like, I want to say like 30% or so, just that he can keep the defense honest and just make the Timberwolves offense more threatening that way. The second most important thing that they have to do, though, is surround these guys with the right players and make smart trades and acquisitions, right? Like I said, the Malik Beasley signing, they signed him to a 4-year, $60 million contract after they ended up trading for him. I think it's fine just because it matches up with Anthony Edwards' contract right now. Anthony Edwards, his rookie contract is going to be 4 years long in total, assuming they accept his team options and everything, but I think they will. Yeah, so it matches up there, so it's not going to overlap, which should be fine. I just think that they need to bring in the right guys because this team will be really good offensively, but they were horrible on the defensive end last year. It was actually like really hard to watch at times. And I know they brought in Rubio, who I think is a good defender. Ed Davis is pretty solid, and they got Josh Okogie. But honestly, this team, I doubt they're going to be much better defensively this year. And because of that, I think that they will finish 13th in the West at 28-44. There's just so many deep teams in the West this year. The conference overall is just so good. It's continuing to get better. And this team, they're still relatively young. Russell, he came over last year, and he didn't get to play too many games with Towns just because Towns was dealing with some injury issues. So when you combine the fact that they're young, they still got to build up some chemistry, and defensively, they really need to improve. I think that there are going to be times where they're going to go for like 120, like 130 points in a game, and they're going to beat teams that way. But there's also going to be times where when your shots aren't falling, there's going to be a lot of games probably where they get blown out, and I think it's kind of going to end up going where they finish near the bottom of the standings. Hopefully, for their sake, they're able to keep their draft pick this year. I know that if it ends up going to the Warriors, or sorry, if they end up getting a top 3 pick this year, because it's top 3 protected, their 2022 pick ends up going to the Warriors, which I think would probably be better for the Wolves. I think you'd rather have your pick this year, potentially a top 3 pick this year in a stacked draft class, than getting a pick next year. And then you have to wait kind of to get another young guy. I think Minnesota, that way, you could bring in a guy like maybe BJ Boston or something. I don't know the draft class off the top of my head, or who might be the best fit with them. I haven't really thought about that too much, but even if they don't want to keep that pick, being able to trade it and just bring in a lot of nice role players, good solid players that could fit well with their young big 3 of Russell, Edwards, and Towns, would be really, really nice. There are some nice 2021 free agents that I think they could go after. Maybe Tony Snell, PJ Tucker. There are a few restricted free agents like Josh Hart or Zach Collins, but I think if they overpaid a little bit for them, maybe they could get them. There's also Rashawn Holmes or Norman Powell, who will probably decline his player option, I think, after next season, but we'll have to see about that. But if they can fill out the roster with guys like that, I think that will be really good. And if they can just, center their offense around, a combination of Russell, Edwards, and Towns getting most of the shots and all that, and then kind of trying to hide those guys on the defensive end. Hopefully they can make those guys better on the defensive end, so that they don't have to, try to hide them or, surround them with elite defenders. But, that might be unrealistic to expect. So we'll have to see. I think Minnesota, they're going to show flashes this year, but ultimately they're probably going to finish near the bottom of the standings. Hopefully they can get a top 3 pick and keep that pick in this year's draft, and then either flip that for some nice depth or sign some of those free agents, like I was saying, guys that can shoot, guys that can defend, hopefully guys that are young too, that can kind of fit in with their timeline. But overall, I think Minnesota's got a bright young future. I think people forget that Karl-Anthony Towns is still really, really young. It's just that guys come into the league so young now that I think that, they play like 5-6 years and we forget that they're still, only like 23 or 24 years old. So Minnesota, the future is bright, but they just gotta take things slowly, try to build up the depth of their team, and don't make any drastic moves, and they should be okay.